All right, we are live on Tuesday night. This is the Dr. Boz Show, and thank you for joining me. Habits, they shape our identity, and that's why it's important to have more than just a checklist if you're doing the ketogenic diet. You need to be able to identify what you want your future self to be. Focus on that identity. The more specific you can be, the better. And in this series, we've worked on several things, and we are on our fourth week of Atomic Keto. We started with a bit of focus on P.L.A.T.E, and if you haven't watched that, you know that if you've watched that, you know that those are those index cards where we're trying to help you find what emotion is going haywire when those certain habits hijack your progress. And we've also discussed the importance of self-study, writing down one habit that you want your future self to do, and that identity of those bad habits that keep showing up when you don't want them to show up anymore. Tonight, we're going to look at that first step of creating lifelong habits and the process of breaking those undesirable ones. We'll try not to use the word bad. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate all of you helping me with my sound check. We are going to look at some numbers here on the beginning of a ketogenic Tuesday night. And I know some of you listened all the way to the end of the last week and heard that I had parent-teacher conferences, but those are next week. And I am happy to report that they're carefully scheduled. While I am checking my numbers here, I'm going to read to you something I haven't clicked on recently. This is a review from the audiobook Keto Continuum. So L. Peterson wrote in and said, I am very well read with keto. This book came up on my recommends for me. At first, I thought it was a bit basic. However, I soon realized that it was exactly what I needed. With her storytelling approach, I found that I related very quickly to the character. That's the part that I've been missing for the last 2 years on my keto journey. She hits the behavioral component of keto very well. I love a 12-step in a continuum. That's very funny. Good, enough blood. So ketones 2.1 or 2.7, wow, and glucose 71, if somebody wants to calculate that for me. The rest of it says, I really enjoy how she broke down the behavioral components. I finally nailed down my why and was granted new motivation. Excellent read. Would suggest reading all the way through. The second one talks about a really awesome review that I'll let you guys go read. It is under Audible for Keto Continuum. And I just want to say thank you for the people that take the time to put those reviews in. It is the best way. People do write in and say, Doc, how can I say thank you? I'm like, write a review. Write a review. Please write a review. I am going to click off of the, let's see, where's that? I want to make a couple of announcements that for those of you that are tuning in, you know that this is where I answer questions, is on these Tuesday Night Lives. So put your questions in the chat. I have a team helping organize some of the good questions. I have some awesome stories from my support group this morning. But I also want to give you some other places that I have scheduled coming up in the next few months. So I've been asked to speak with Dr. Ken Berry and his crew on the low carb cruise coming up here in May. The second big invite is to KetoCon in Austin. And I found out the gal who organizes that lives like 10 miles from me here in the Tampa area. But finally, the Keto Summit, Orlando Keto Summit, is also coming up in August, 4th through the 7th. You can put in a little DRBOZ for a promo code if you want to sign up for that. I've really changed the style of how some of the videos come out on the YouTube channel, and I've been public speaking since, I don't know, as long as I can remember. It was a thing that happened in church long ago, and then suddenly I'm like, oh no, I've done this a lot. It's a little a little revealing how long I've been public speaking. But the lectures that I give to a real live audience are what I'm totally missing. I've been working on some slides and really coming up with some great lectures that I get to give at these conferences. I'll be practicing some of the slides with our 3 to 5 minute videos that are uploads, and you can check in on those. Last Friday was a really good animation on insulin resistance, and if you haven't checked that out, I think it turned out awesome. My team did such a good job of helping me. And the best place to see me in my prime is in front of an audience. So I'm looking forward to these speaking events. I'm working hard at the lectures that they've asked me to give. And if you want to join me. Oh, the other thing is P.L.A.T.E, Iowa is on Thursday and Friday, June 2nd and 3rd. Yes, June 2nd and 3rd, P.L.A.T.E, Iowa. Like the closest town to P.L.A.T.E, Iowa is Des Moines. Let me do one little click here. That P.L.A.T.E, Iowa is the 12-hour workshop that I usually give, to Department of Defense for a long time, and then several other places where I take how do you get peak brain performance. P.L.A.T.E, Iowa is one of the communities that's just been very generous to hire me to come in and teach their community. And if you show up, you get to be part of the workshop. I'm still thinking there's no cost. I thought there might be a charge for the meals, but maybe there'll be a small charge for the meals. But you got to get to P.L.A.T.E, Iowa, so I guess that's where the cost is. And if you've looked at that course on bozmd.com, you'll know that it is it's $2,500 to do that course, and I am thankful for every person that's done that. It's really, they're on my short list of favorite students, improving their communities on how do you change some of the incredibly stuck problems in our community. But P.L.A.T.E, Iowa is just a champion of that mindset on educating the people. So if you show up, you get 12 hours of me on Thursday and Friday of that week, and it's going to be great. I'm really excited about it. So let's move on to just making sure that you hear a little bit about what we're doing on this series. We've had several of you reply to our emails. Thank you so much for opening them. Michelle and I are using, Michelle is my sister-in-law. She was the star of our documentary last year, and between the two of us, we have some habits that we're working on, and she writes about hers in the email, and I try to do some of mine here on the show and in my support group. To say, how do you really change behavior? And I think this is where the keto diet can be this playtime for some people, that they lower their carbs, they do lose a little weight, but they fall off and say, it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And I'll tell you, that's exactly what alcoholics say when they come in saying, I can have a couple beers a week, can't I? And when they've got addiction habits, which I really think are so much easier to recognize when you get into the grit of how hard it is to change behavior, that your brain's hardwired to do a few things that I couldn't be more pleased with an author than James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits. So we are putting a mash together of keto and atomic habits, and we're going to go through those little lessons at the beginning of this. We will take the time at the end of the second half of the show to answer those questions, and so type them in and we will get there. This week in our email, we shared that this isn't the easiest step of okay, so we've identified a few things so far in our where's this is the one I want. I know that's not the one I want. I want this one. Oh no, still wrong one. That's the one I want. We've identified a few things in our process of how do you change and really stop the cycle of starting and stopping a ketogenic diet. I contend that there's not a lot of support groups out there that do look at encouraging people to stay the course. But one of my favorite kind of cross trainings has been that in medicine, if you want to change a behavior, you got to put them around people that are exempling the behaviors you want. And really that is a support group that shows up in the world of all the teachings that we do. So this week when we say, let's stop the carb recycling and make it obvious, we are going to show you a little bit about what we're talking about there. So if you've been checking in before, you know that we said, hey, this is Atomic Keto. We want you to forget about those goals and focus on your systems. We'll unpack that a little bit more as we go along. But that first week we said find those little note cards and put person, location, activity, timing, and emotion associated when you find yourself on the other side of that habit, on the other side of, gee, this is not at all what I was planning on. I fell right off that wagon. And sometimes identifying why you fell off, it's very obvious if you have got it written down, if you're stepping out of that moment. And so I ask you to take some note cards, and when you find yourself saying, okay, this is the part that I didn't want to do, and I want you to write down what persons were around you, what location are you at, what activity are you doing, or what timing, what time of the day is it, and then most importantly, what emotion are you circling around, and what the moments that seem to cause a connection to those relapses. That the next thing we talked about was when people change and set a goal for improving a habit or that New Year's resolution, they say, this is the outcome that I want, and I know that I'm going to have to do these couple of things to get there. And they last think about identity. But if you look at the processes of not just patients, but also, Atomic Habits does a good job of saying those people who stick with an identity that doesn't go away, that they say, you know what, I'm not just trying to quit smoking, I'm no longer a smoker. I'm not just trying to start running, I'm a runner. That identity mindset is incredibly important for that systematic outcome that starts from the inside, which are tiny little changes. Nobody on the outside can tell you're thinking any differently, but boy, does it make a difference that the outcome and processes, they will surface, they will be there. That's not like they're not important, but what the identity of who you are needs to become the focus. As I look at the big roadmap for how this book has been outlined and how we're going to use some of these, the next few emails that are coming out, as well as looking at some of the shifts or changes that we're going to ask. Hopefully you're joining along with us. Hopefully you know what we mean by falling off a wagon more than once. And that comes with the systems around you aren't enough to hold that true change in behavior. So the pillars of how this works is people have a cue for the behavior that starts, whether it's good or bad. That satisfies a craving, or there's a craving inside of that process that leads to response and a reward. And we think of those cues and cravings as the problem side of this equation, and we think of rewards and responses as our solution sides. And as we look at the first chapter of the first section, if you would, of this process, it looks at how do you make the cues obvious or at least invisible. And I think looking at cues, not just in your life, but maybe when I always think it's easier to point out what my husband does wrong than it does for when I do things wrong. And when I want him to change a behavior, I can point out, here's how the setup goes, and here's where you trigger that identity, or that trigger of wanting the wrong thing, and then this is what's happening next, honey, and now that's why you should change that. I am happily married for 25 plus years, and that isn't that's never the way it's received. That's the way I give that information to someone. Meaning when you've got a cue that's starting a behavior that goes sequentially down a pathway leading to the relapse of a ketogenic diet, or leading to a habit that you've wanted to change, but it's not getting you there. I always think it's much easier to identify those outside your system, outside your own behaviors than your own. But that's not how we figure out the difference of today's problems being non-existent tomorrow. And when we look at habits, they really are hardwired. That you do them without thinking about them. That's part of a good habit. Is no, I walk into the office, I go to the fridge, I get a bubble water, I put it on my desk. I do that every time I walk in the office. That's what I do. I get a cup of coffee every morning. This is what I do. Those are some of the behaviors that are very stable, and I don't think about them. I don't have any brain energy that is spent on doing those behaviors. It's when those behaviors are they lead to the wrong answers. They lead to the next step that is always after that other step that I don't even notice on the algorithm. When my brain is starting to fire and do an algorithm that isn't quite. It was nowhere. I was going to say it isn't quite what I planned. It's nowhere what I planned. But here it happened again. So I'm going to share a story that happens in my life. And I was talking with my team this morning, and this reminded me of something I learned long ago. My husband and I were on the Dr. Phil show. You can try to Google that one. But it was many years ago. I think it was my first year of practice, so it had to be 2001, 2002, 2001, yeah, somewhere in there. No, Walker was a baby, so it had to be 2003. Anyway, whatever. That's when we were on the Dr. Phil show. It was at Christmas time, and I had been watching how he coaches people to change their thinking, because I was now in private practice, and my original plan in life was to have intubated patients in an ICU on a critical care team, and now I was a mother with children in a clinic, and all these people who wanted weight loss help, and they were, I gave them blood pressure medicines and diabetes medicines, but I'm like, you get this isn't going to work out well unless you lose the weight. And of course, behavior change was really nobody taught us that in medical school. So I'm watching Dr. Phil as he's doing some of these weight loss processes. And I can remember him sharing a story that is happening in my life, is that we're now in a new home in Florida, and thanks to the housing crunch, we live about 40 minutes from where my son goes to school and where I go to work. So we get up in the morning and we leave early in the morning, and we don't get home until after. It's late. His after school activities don't end until 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and that's another hour commute before we're home. So when I get into that house, I walk through the front door, and it is reflexive for me to walk to the refrigerator and open it. And it's the bad choices that happen after I open that refrigerator that are not good. But it's mindless. It's a habit that I don't even know I'm doing. And it reminds me of a story that Dr. Phil said where he was having a similar problem. He would drive his car into the garage, he'd go into the side door of the garage, and right next to that garage was the kitchen. So he would walk into the kitchen and open the door. And so he backed up his behavior and said, if I park the car outside the garage, I just leave it outside and I walk to the front door, and then I go in the front door, and now I do the behaviors that I stopped doing something that was automatic in my mind. And as much as I don't want to admit that the fridge is where I go and I open it up even when I'm fasting, and that's a really stupid idea, don't do that. It's where my plan that was going to be a 72-hour fast suddenly turned it into 48 hours because I'm done and I've got a fridge and it's now open and I can smell something. So setting up a habit that led to the next four things of what was the place. It's as I walk in, what was the person's. It's usually I want to spend time with my husband. I want to talk about my day. I want to decompress. The location was my home. My activity was I'm tired. I've had a long day and I want to relax, and I'm looking to shut down, and food sounds like a good way to help with that, right? So the time is usually end of the day. I do great with my checklist and my automatic thoughts in the morning. It's when I'm tired and I'm done and at the end of the day. And then what's the emotion? I want to be around my husband. I want to be comforted. So that emotion is a loneliness for being around my favorite person. And if he's not in the mood to hang out with me, food will substitute. Those are the kinds of habits that to break down a habit and say, well, how do I change that? In that process of looking at the cue is as I walk in, it's very obvious that the fridge is right there when I walk through the door. And when I look at the craving, what am I interested in? I'm looking for some comfort. I'm looking for some relationship time. So I escape from my world of a busy day. When I put food in, I get some of that relaxation, and it's very satisfying. But if I look at what emotion I'm trying to chase, I first have to recognize, is this behavior, what other behaviors are happening in my in my sequence of a day. So as we look at the steps for this week on how do I help anybody that's watching, say, okay, here's how you hack this. So you've got your note cards. Those are those really important to lay them out. Look for a pattern of where is it you're screwing this up? Where is it what emotion is it that you're actually chasing? Hopefully you did a little better than my teenage boys when they would do check-ins for emotion and say, it's not just good or bad. You really need to look for what do I want when I walk in that house? What is the emotion that I'm seeking? And it is lonesomeness. It is connection. I want to hang out with my favorite person. To substitute the wrong emotion, you're not really chasing what is the truth about why I make that decision at the end of the day. So James Clear writes in his book that start with the first 2 hours of your day and just be really, really honest about writing what are the steps that you do each day. That I've never been one to step on a scale routinely, but when he was writing out he was like, I get up in the morning, I check my phone. I don't do that. I get up in the morning, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I put in my contacts, and there's this thing right next to me called the scale, and I never step on it. But I know that if I would document my weight daily, I would probably that would be one sequence that would be a better habit that I could put in. So I put on my checklist that I ignore the scale. I step right over it. I don't put my feet on it. I just hop right over that. My son checks his weight. He's the wrestler that checks his weight. My husband checks his weight, but that's just not in my habits. Even though it's very easy, it's right there. So writing down these habits is what helps to identify what are your habits. And it's in this process where over the next couple of weeks, we're going to say, well, we've got some habits that are pretty obvious. And when you're looking at how to change a behavior for the better, we want you to find those obvious habits and attach a new behavior next to it. James Clear calls it habit stacking, and I really like that term. It's a process where taking something that you already do and associating a different behavior with it that you want to improve. And it's not going to be perfect. That's not how habits work. But it is impressive how quickly that the change of improvement doesn't, it happens more internally than it does externally at the beginning. But as soon as I started stacking habits, I've done this in the past, that, I had to first find the list of what is it I'm doing right? Is there anything I'm doing right anymore? And when you're working on a habit that you failed on a few times, it can be hard to say, which parts am I doing correctly? So as I look at some of the other things that I know if I do when I walk in the home, if I'm on the phone with someone that I like to talk to, I don't stop at the fridge. I keep talking. I go to the bedroom. I get my clothes and get my jammies on. I don't do the fridge thing. It's like only when I'm alone. So finding those little behavior changes to identify and then work on a habit that it's sabotaging my progress. So if you have been following along in the email, we did put some of this outline and an image in that email this week that shows this process. Obviously, the book has it in there. But I want to close this out with two final slides that I just think really do a good job of delivering what I would say are the punchlines to not just this week's lesson, but kind of the overall theme for what James Clear talks about in his book, and that is no single instance will transform your beliefs. But as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new behavior. By votes, what we're talking about there is the when your brain keeps score of what you do, that's this identity shift that we're asking you to find. Well, who do you want to be? Instead of saying, I'm going to exercise more, that's starting with your goals as the outside circle. Find the identity. I am healthy and energetic and vibrant. And that identity is linked to behaviors. When you get one time that you got up for a workout, it doesn't change who you are. But when you get those votes of, I said I went for a walk. I broke a sweat. I changed who I was before. The number of votes build up that new identity. And in the spirit of having the that identity shift be a reality, we know that the first step is having a clear vision of who you want to be, and then enough wins on a low enough scale that you can change that behavior. The second statement that I wanted to end with tonight was goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are best for making progress. And I loved, I'll link this back to Dr. Phil's. It was this system of parking in the place that led to the door that was right next to the fridge. That's a system issue. By parking in a different spot, which forces him to go in a different door, the system is set up differently. And I really believe that when I look at patterns of improvement, I have a clinic that has no food in it. I don't have a microwave at the clinic. I don't eat while I'm here. I have 2 interns that are helping out with some of the processes here, and the only food they get there are some carnivore crisps, which they are so thankful for. They love those. I love those. But there's also sardines, and that's what's at the office. And if you want food, you have to leave and go somewhere else and eat outside the office. And well, that's not the behavior, that's not the system that's here at the clinic. And I just think it makes it so easy to stay the course and be on that path of what healthy behavior looks like, that it's easy to stay the course. When I'm in a system where I worked from home last Friday, I have a research paper that I've been really trying to, oh my gosh, I wonder if I'm ever going to get done with it. We're like on 40 pages of this academic paper, and as soon as it's done, I swear life is going to get better. But I decided to work from home, and I couldn't believe how tempted I was to eat during the day because the system at home allows that. So again, goals are good for setting a direction. You should have a goal, but it's the systems that make the progress. And I have seen that again and again and again as a improvement for really helping the behavior that comes with a true change of life, of a habit that's less prominent. You know what I was supposed to be doing? I was supposed to be drinking my ketones, and I totally haven't started yet. But I'm like, God, why am I so thirsty? All right, so it's going to be a real test, though, because what time is it? We're halfway through the show, and I haven't started drinking this yet. So the reason I drink this is I check numbers at the beginning and the end of my show, and I'm usually fasting. So those are some good numbers. I'm thankful for those. But adding ketones, if you're buying a product that has ketones in it and your ketones don't go up, you're getting scammed. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is hop over and start looking at some of the questions that I know there were several that were written in at the beginning and one of them relates to a story that was told this morning at my group. I don't know if my team found this very first comment written by Sharon. She was the first comment of the night about an hour before the show started. So I'm going to read that question, and then I'll go to the ones that are on the document here. She writes in, why is my blood pressure dropping to 106/59 when I'm fasting 12 hours and I'm feeling dizzy? So again, Sharon, if you're fasting from a ketogenic state, a state of ketosis is an enhanced metabolism. That's great. This is what we're trying to get your body to do. We're trying to improve your autophagy, reverse some of that aging, and you really do have an improvement in the way the metabolism is working. During a fast, you are stressing the metabolism, and at 12 hours, a higher metabolic state is actually it's a more diuresed is the right word, but I don't know how to explain that without. So you have removed more of the excess fluid in your body. So you can call it dehydrated, but people, when I say that, people say, well, then I should drink more, right? And during a fast, you will lower blood pressure. That's not a bad thing. But when you lower it to the point where you feel dizzy, it means you're not adding enough salt or minerals as you during your fast. So when I say you're dehydrated, everybody says, "Oh, well then I'll drink more." We have a gentleman this last couple of weeks who's been coming to our support group. If you're looking for a support group in the Tampa Bay area, I am so thankful for the folks that show up to the support group at the Pin Chasers, which is the bowling alley next to my office, 4809 North Armenia Avenue, every Tuesday morning, 8 to 9. And we are super thankful for that business to open up early, let us have I think it's their birthday party room, but we have a great little meeting there. And today there was a gentleman who's been coming for most of the time, and he is doing his first 72-hour fast. And he's found that his blood pressure looks really good, his ketones look really good, and wonders, now, why am I doing this fast for 72 hours? And he's right on the edge of coming off several blood pressure medicines. He had a stroke, not from blood pressure, but for some other complications. And his blood pressure was very low when he was on all the medications. And he wonders, can I get off all of them? So as he teeters on this tiny little dose of a blood pressure medicine, the blood pressure looked okay. But when he stopped, the blood pressure went back up. So I said, what you really need to do is to do 8 of those 72-hour fasts. Let's just start with one. Start with one 72-hour fast. And what's happening with him, as well as Sharon that writes in, is that during a fast, you do really wring out that body from excess inflammation. And as he stresses his metabolism for several weeks in a row by an extended fast, he will go from that blood pressure that's teetering on not quite normal. If he walks into his doctor with enough of those numbers elevated, they're going to start those blood pressure medicines or go up to a higher level. But if he can wring out that inflammation just a bit more by lowering the chronic inflammation in his body, which is what he will gain from an extended fast. So Sharon's blood pressure drops during her fast because she diureses, she wrings out. And by adding the salt back, you will see the blood pressure stabilize. You'll feel better. You shouldn't feel yucky when you fast. And by the time the improvement happens on the blood pressure, it's usually the end of let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger. The end of a fast that has been hopefully lowering their blood pressure as the fasting goes on. She's only 12 hours into her fast, whereas the guy from group this morning I think he was 36 hours into his fast. So, all right, Bernie writes in and says, I've been keto off and on for years with major hiccups at the holidays or if I get sick. How do you stay keto when you've always cooked lots of carb-loaded foods for extended family? Boy, oh boy, to love with carbs is, that's just, yeah. Can you just say that's like sin number 1? I say that as a sinner, as somebody who's done this as well, that when I look at the improvements that you can have from a ketogenic diet, I say, until family shows up. Of course, the fastest way to do that is, or maybe the most significant way to do that is to get your family to go keto, and that is a good idea. So as I look at the tricks that I do when I'm with family is I don't make them eat like I eat. I try to have my foods, the ones that I know are keto. Like I've had some new favorites that I added to my menu, like cream spinach, which is really high in fat, and it's about the only vegetable that I kind of really like to make and eat. But I fill it with savory and not with carbs. There are some hacks to the ketogenic diet that you can do that make those great foods. But I have the family that often loves to come. They bring those carbs, and then when they go away, if they leave them behind, I throw them away. It's not good. They're trying to say I love you with the food, which is probably what you're trying to say when you say it's Christmas, we're together. I want to say I love you. And I've done this in the past where I said I love you with food. And unfortunately, what you're teaching the next generation is this is how you say I love you. And for working with patients with food addictions, true food addictions, it begins at a young age saying, this is how I was comforted. This is how people comfort one another. I encourage you to start different traditions. My family, my parents and I, and my siblings all played cribbage. I don't know if that's just old-fashioned, but it was a place where you sat and you didn't have to speak much. Sometimes, family's great. I don't want to talk. I just want to play a game. But you're together, and there's something about like the third or fourth cribbage game where a conversation happens that was never possible over food, because you're so focused on the food, you missed the person. So I recommend other things my mother used to do for my kids was we had treasure hunts that you would go to grandma's, and they're not looking forward to the cookies because it's a burst of dopamine, and then you got a crazy kid full of energy that sometimes isn't welcome. But when you had a puzzle, especially a treasure hunt puzzle, it took time. You had to prepare for them. So that instead of time for cooking, she had time that she would set up these treasure hunts. And one clue would lead to the next clue, and that clue would lead to the next clue. And instead of treats, she would put dollar bills at the place where the treasure hunt, the next clue always had a dollar bill next to it, a silver dollar bill. So I would just say substitute the traditions. That's how I do it anyway. Good question. Hard one to answer, actually. Let's go to Terry, who says, I'm on my 6th week of keto. My tests are always the darkest color on the test. Should they be that even after almost 48 hours of fasting? I am in my 6th week, and my tests are always at the darkest color on the test. So that's good. Those are the highest level of ketones, and that's great. Where I often worry is where they say, hey, I have one of those ketone test strips that it never turns positive. And then I worry that the strips have gone bad. But when you have dark ones, that's not the case. No, take that as a win and keep going, man. That's great. Gary said, wife joined me on keto and only been on for a week and a half, but it's disheartening when her weight went down 200 grams, but a few days later up 400 grams. Any advice that I should give her? So when I look at people with a fluctuating weight at the beginning, it is really one of the things that, let's do this one. It is really one of those fluctuations that you can almost predict. And by that, I mean, it's a common recurring problem for people who've been on a ketogenic diet, but have a lot of inflammation. So this is the place where when people suffer, and I mean that because you, the husband, have more mitochondria in your muscle cells, you will have an easier time, even if you're insulin resistant. Take both male, female, insulin resistant. The male with a higher number of mitochondria will have an easier way of reversing that than the female will, especially if she's had children. She's had childbearing seasons. That is difficult. Their hormones get in the way. It's not a hormonal. It's not like the hormones are the enemy. It's just that's part of the cross you bear as on the other side of delivering children. But it does change the amount of fluid deposits that happen in those first few weeks. It is why I push them to take the online course. The man who was saying, how do I get my family to be keto? I'm like, you buy the online course and you pass the password around to everybody who wants to learn it. These short little videos really do help, especially those. I mean, what did I really write that book, the last book for? What did I really do that online course for? So many patients that thought they have to see an internal they have to see me to know how to do the keto diet. No, there are some rules, and especially if they have that the weight that goes down, and then they do this fluctuation. They're insulin resistant. They're going to have a problem. It's not going to be an easy course, but they are the people that benefit the most from staying the course and getting that real chemistry shift out of a glucose-driven system to a keto-driven system. So the online course goes through that really well. The best hack is actually her cells are flipping back and forth from keto burning to not keto burning to glucose burning. And I went through this morning in my group where there's somebody having this like, hey, I'm 2 weeks into this. I really haven't lost any weight. I don't feel good. and they're insulin resistant. So they'll get there, but they're going to have to wait so much longer to get there that you can hack it. And that is put ketones in your circulation. Ketones in circulation signal your liver to make ketones. So ketones beget ketones. When you're insulin resistant, they're a long ways from getting that cycle of feeling good, of that diuresing, that wringing out of the person having the lower blood pressure. You can hack it, you can hijack it and say, once you have ketones in circulation, this gets a ton better. And it's about 3 or 4 weeks, which is, I mean, for people who aren't insulin resistant, they can get a reverse of that metabolism within about 4 days of lowering their carbs to 20. But insulin resistance, they're waiting 10 to 14 days. And that's if they're lucky. I've had some wait 6 weeks and not be able to get a really solid, consistent ketones. And that's because they do well with the 20 carbs, then they screw it up for a day, which is not, I mean, that happens. But they pay a price far beyond the rest of us. Now they're going to be out of that ketosis cycle for several days. Their cells are not going to see a ketone. So to hack it is to sip on ketones every day for the first 3 weeks. I tell them, if this is you, if you have the weight fluctuation, if they start out with higher than 200 carbs, or if they don't peak ketones within the first 72 hours of starting the ketogenic diet, sip on ketones. You don't have to do this forever. You just have to do this to wake up the mechanics inside that cell. And it's about 3 or 4 weeks into this that they say, oh my gosh, I've lost 15 pounds and I feel amazing. And it really is a light switch. Like, you'd think they'd notice the first 12, but it's like they wake up 10 pounds lighter. So Gary, it is tough to have a husband-wife where the husband, you have the metabolic advantage. And I would invest in ketones for her because they really will help both of you stay the course. Let's go to next question. Good question though. Sherry, you say once you've been keto for a while, we will eat less. Does that mean if I still eat as much as I always have, it takes that much to fill me up? OMAD also. So this is a great question, and when I look at people who are eating in excess for what their body nourishment is, it is very true that once your body is keto, your hunger is satiated at a lower volume of food because the hormones are finally working. Let's go to that last question where the wife is having that fluctuations. What is really wrong inside that equation that she's struggling, that she's going to have the water weight that goes up and down and the diuresis that isn't happening? Her hormones do not work right. When she eats fat, she doesn't get this surge of comfort, this surge of satiety that comes over her because insulin's been running the show. Insulin's been hijacking that fat-based hormone, and she doesn't get the peak of her hormones and then a relax. That's what it should feel like when you eat. When you're keto adapted and you've been there a while, that surge of hormones and then relax should come from a bolus, a meal of high fatty foods. And here's where the psychology part comes in, because the habit of eating a larger amount often can derail us to say, no. From a very young age, I had to clean the plate. And I fill the plate to this level because I know that's what I usually eat. So in someone who's been keto adapted, they should have those satiety hormones. They should be able to, if you've watched the online course and you've heard me joke about this, I say, eat a stick of butter. Butter is high fat, and you should get to about a third of the stick of butter and be so grossed out, so nauseated from high hormones of fat that you can't eat the whole thing. But if your system doesn't do that, if you don't recognize that is what satiety feels like, they won't, they'll keep eating. They'll say, but she said to eat the whole stick of butter. And they're like, they have a sense of nausea, but boy, this is just what I've been told to do. So there comes a point when the ketogenic diet, you have recruited those hormones to be on your side. You do feel satiated, but the behavior of how you've behaved for the last 30 years is haunting you. So this is where habits come in. The cue is throw away the plates that are this size in your family and only have this size of plates. That's been known to cut 15 pounds off of everybody in the family over the course of a year. It's a system that works better. When I look at people who tend to overeat in OMAD, I mean, they're putting in like 1,000 calories when they have one meal. And although the calories isn't where I have them focus, it's such a large bolus of food. First of all, you can't even absorb all that, but it will signal the insulin to rise and the insulin resistance to happen, but you aren't going to tap into your own resources when the amount of food that you're eating is so voluminous, matching the previous seasons that you've been eating in. So I hope that answers the question, because it's not about the ability for you to feel full is related to a hormonal response. If that hormonal response isn't happening, either you're not recognizing it or you're not as keto adapted as you thought. But volume of food is related to satiety, and it's that ability to recognize it and then make the next choice, which is, hey, stop eating when you feel full. That definitely rule number one. Stop eating when you feel full. Good question. Let's go to, is it safe to exercise when injecting insulin? Let me see here if I can. Oh, dang. Hold on, I got something bouncing around back here. Okay, so let's go to, here we go. Yeah, is it safe to exercise if I'm injecting insulin? Okay, so I'm guessing you mean exercise on a ketogenic diet while on insulin. You'll notice that in almost all of my videos and all of my teaching, I don't talk much about exercise. I think it comes from 20 years of telling people to exercise only to have nobody do what they said they were doing. I mean, it was a rare case where somebody would exercise to the point of weight loss. And when they did do it, it wasn't for a long time. What I found is when people's metabolism and bodies were healthier, they wanted to be active. So when the absence of advice on exercise is because the variability of wanting to spend energy through exercise it's usually fleeting. So let's back up and say, is it safe to exercise if I'm injecting insulin? There's just too many traps in that question. I can't give you a safe answer without putting both of us at risk probably. All right, Anne writes in and says, 5th metatarsal 10 days ago. 5th metatarsal 10 days ago. I did a 75 fast. Let's try this again. Where's that button? There we go. 5th metatarsal 10 days ago. I'm guessing that's a surgery that on her foot that she had done 10 days ago. I did a 75 fast. I'm guessing 75-hour fast. Struggling to get smog calcium in diet. More calcium in diet without dairy that is inflammatory to me. Should I go on dairy? Okay, I'm trying to put together that question. So let's see here if I can make that a little bit smaller. Should I go on it? So the question is, should you go on dairy when there's inflammation from dairy in the past? Okay, why do you want to get calcium if you're right after surgery? Let's try this again. I think I understand the question better by saying, should you be taking calcium? So for the most part, and I just put out a short on Sunday about how when you're on a ketogenic diet, there are truly less needs for supplements. One of those supplements is calcium. You have a huge deposit of calcium in your bones all throughout your body that your system is going to really, you have lots of places to get calcium. So I'm guessing the reason you want to take calcium is because you think it's going to improve the healing from a surgery. The most important part to heal from a surgery is low inflammation. So if milk causes you an allergic response, which one of those promises that I make to people with on a ketogenic journey is your allergies will be less. Whatever caused the allergic reaction originally, it will be less as time goes forward. But if you're still in a stage where you drink milk and you get inflammation, you get diarrhea from the milk, well, don't put dairy in if it's giving you diarrhea. Inflammatory response is usually pretty easy for people to feel. They feel swollen. They get diarrhea. That would be the worst thing you could do for a post-surgical repair. You want to weave together that surgical scar, and that means those cells need to touch one another and they need to weave together the fibroblasts to seal a scar. Same thing goes for a bone that needs to repair. That enemy is inflammation. So we would want your Dr. Boz ratio to be as low as possible during that surgery. Don't add dairy to it if it causes you inflammation. All right. Last question is, can type 1 diabetes do keto? Yes, they can. They need to be careful. I highly recommend my type 1 diabetics do keto, and it's in part because they need far less insulin when they're not chasing the carb insulin cycles that typically type 1 diabetics do. So as I look at that answer, there are a couple of major teams out there that do the type 1 diabetes. I have some local type 1 diabetics that I'm very excited about being part of our support group. They offer an incredible layer of teaching. Insulin turns into this bad guy, insulin did all this to our bodies, insulin made us fat, insulin causes the inflammation, insulin causes the cancer, and you get to thinking like it's this awful thing you should have none of. And then I point out, nope, you definitely want some insulin. Let me show you what it looks like to not have insulin. And a type 1 diabetic, obviously, they don't make insulin. That process of teaching them how to do keto, because we as the physicians or your providers are never going to do as good a job at replacing that insulin as your body does. Instead, the insulin carb cycle of taking in carbs, giving insulin, taking carbs, giving insulin, your average sugar, healthy average sugar, should be 73. And so when I look at most type 1's graphs or their charts, they're like, oh, I'm doing great, I'm at 110. I'm like, nope, that's going to lead to dementia. That's going to lead to fasting aging of your heart. That's going to lead to coronary heart disease. The high level of insulin is inflammatory. And so the only way we get numbers that are closer to that 73 without bottoming them out is through a carefully planned type 1 diabetic keto diet, which is not easy. All right, so we are looking at the time here, and I am going to check my sugars while I finish looking at some of the chats. I do appreciate those of you that write in the questions. I also have a couple of announcements that I didn't say earlier. I'm still in Amazon jail. Okay, Amazon jail means that something has gone terribly wrong with our listings on Amazon. It's me and several other people that erroneously got labeled that there was stuff in our products that's not in our products. But now we have to prove that it wasn't in our products, and we've proved it, and our paperwork's in, and it's been in for about 3.5 weeks, but we are still in line to get approved. So I just want you to know that there are products for sale on bozmd.com. It is actually it's a way better process, and I can control when something goes wrong on bozmd.com. I cannot do that when it's on Amazon. So we are in the process of putting our products on Walmart because of that this exact problem of Amazon is lovely. I'm not chirping about Amazon. Don't block me on Amazon any further. But when people write in and say, this happened on Amazon, I'm like, dude, there's nothing I can do about it. So ketones are about the same, because that's probably because I didn't start drinking them until halfway through the show. And I think that wasn't my glucose 71 at the last time. So it's about the same as it was before that, but I promise you there are ketones in that drink. I just told you if your ketones don't go up when you drink a product, you might be being scammed, but I guarantee they're in the products that are sold on my page. So again, I really appreciate you guys that are giving praise for the emails we're sending out. We are really looking to improve the communication to the audience that tunes in. We know that changing habits is hard, and there are lots of keto channels out there that flash you out the rules and a whole bunch of studies, but I've learned that if you really want to change behavior for the long course, you want to give them the freedom to get away from those prescription medications and stay the long haul for a better life. That's what we try to do on this channel. I know I get a lot of pushback for people struggling on the ketogenic diet. I get a lot of pushback for having them clean their cupboards. So if you're watching this on replay, I really love how this topic turns out on one of the videos that we're going to link to the end of the show. I will see you actually next week is actually parent-teacher conferences and those lectures that I'm so excited to give coming up in the spring. There was a lecture from about 2 years ago, 2019, that did not get aired. And I'm airing it next week, and it turned out so good. I can't believe it's been hiding in the bowels of my drive of a video that never got published. So I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you all next week. That will be on a replay, and I'll see you live in 2 weeks.